Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Prarabdha is classified into threefold: wishful, not wishful, and wishful because of another. When it comes to wishful, Vedanta classifies the most heinous sins and sins which does not provide any solution other than suffering it falls under this category. In fact, Bhagavad Gita is cited here by the author, where Krishna says, even he who knows acts in conformity with his own nature. All beings follow their nature. What can prevention do to them? And Acharya cites three examples. Take the case of Nala, Rama, and Yudhishthira. If there is a way to get to, they are all kings, and they had all the machinery and facilities to get over their sorrows. Yet they couldn't get over. So, this is prarabdha of the first category called wishful. A question therefore arises: when you say that it cannot be changed, then you say Lord is the controller of Maya, he can control anything under this universe. Then this is going uncontrolled. So how do you say he's a controller of Maya and all powerful? That's the question an objectionist can easily raise. For which Vedanta answers, no, it's not a question of not inability to control. It's a question of part of God's design that he or she should undergo that prarabdha and exhaust it. It's part of the design of nature. So it is not inability. Now, coming to the second category of wishful prarabdha, this again, we may have to quote Bhagavad Gita for this, wherein Bhagavan says, even that which on account of delusion you do not wish to do, you will do involuntarily, bound by your own karma, born of your nature. So, what is the basis for wishful karma? Anger, desire and anger. And they are cyclic. You desire something, you get it, you enjoy it and you want it more. You desire something, you don't get it, you become angry and you start suffocating and you start frustrating the process. So these two are the root cause for such desires which emanate out of these two and which they call it as wishful prarabdha. And the third one is something which does not fall under either of the two categories, and therefore the residual desires are classified as falling under the other. So these are the three types of prarabdha karma which all of us inherit when we take a birth of a particular form and variety based on our purva janma punya and papa. So, because it is preset and ordained in the case of first, and it becomes involuntary in the case of second, is there a remedy, is the question. We saw yesterday about reluctance leading to detachment. Now, there is a further emphasis to the process and puts it in a beautiful dimension, saying that a fresh seed, when you sow it, it starts sprouting and growing. And it leads to more fresh seeds to occur. And the process is cyclic and continuous. Now what we need to do as human beings, as jivas, is fry the seed. So A fried seed cannot lead to fresh sowing and sprouting of fresh seeds. But a fried seed can always be used for eating. Therefore, Vedanta teaches us the technique of how to fry the seed and subsume the prarabdha by either enjoying the pleasures or suffering the pain in the course of that birth. That is exactly the prescription given in this case. They say once your mind becomes a fried seed, then it can do two things. It has to enjoy whatever it is destined, but since it does not carry the mistaken impression of universe being true and body being the self, that gets detached, then it only results in enjoying or suffering that particular pain or pressure without a further multiple of it. This is frying the seed, nothing else. Or else, if we allow the seed to be fresh and capable of sprouting again and again, we will do two things. Automatically, we will enjoy or suffer, and we will keep believing that this is the source of enjoyment, and we'll try to go for it more and more and create fresh prarabdha. So that has to be, see, we can do very limited with prarabdha, but we have all the right to control what can happen to us for the future. And the steps are only to these two preliminary steps, followed by the tendency to arrest it. So this is exactly what is being prescribed. Now they say Vedanta gives one more dimension. If you try to roast the seed or fry the seed and make it a fried seed, the output the mind generates is twofold. One, it removes the anxiety for a future desire. What is not obtainable, it would not go after it. And whatever it has to enjoy or suffer, due to prarabdha, it will start enjoying it or suffering it. So roasted seed takes the anxiety syndrome out of us, which is a huge breeding ground for fresh desires. Two, once anxiety goes, the sense of anticipation also goes. When do we anticipate? Only when there are expectations. So all this is because of the mistaken notion that universe is true. That's the seed. So once we are able to cultivate this habit, the outputs are threefold. We will not be anxious, we will not be determined to anticipate, and when expectations slowly come down and diminish and eventually vanish, what will be left is only the residual prarabdha, which will find its own way to exhaust because we have no control over it. In fact, there is a clear caution there. Vedanta says that which has not to happen will not happen, and what ought to happen will only happen and not otherwise. Once this is clear in our mind, let prarabdha flow through us. Whatever destiny has in store for us, let it flow through. But we will prepare our journey at least for the future and for its betterment. Let's continue tomorrow. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The topic on desire and prarabdha comes to a close with this following discussion. Vedanta says the following things. Imagine this universe to be a magical world and an unreal world, and pursue your life. This is the first command which Vedanta wants us to follow. A question is raised. If you say prarabdha is invincible, is it a deterrent for a jiva in attaining self-realization? If it's going to stop, then why the effort? Or if it's going to act against us, then why should we put effort? Therefore, Vedanta clarifies they are not mutually exclusive. Knowledge and prarabdha are not mutually exclusive because they operate out of different provinces. This is the assurance and guidance which we get by knowing Vedanta. How do they say so? If prarabdha says this universe is truth, whereas Vedanta says universe is illusion, then there is a conflict. If knowledge of realization is going to destroy this universe or eclipse this universe once and for all, then prarabdha, then there is no way prarabdha can be exhausted. A realized soul will then have left out prarabdha, will never be work out for him or her. But that's not the reality. The reality is how they are compatible. A, this universe is illusion. Therefore, prarabdha will continue to act. But the practitioner of Vedanta, if he identifies this as an illusion, he stops accumulating prarabdha slowly for the future and will allow only the existing prarabdha to exhaust. So this is not something incompatible between knowledge or realization and prarabdha. Then the next question comes, so you say they are not incompatible. All right, we accept. But the moment a jiva attains mukti, salvation or realization, then why should they spend that prarabdha? Where is the need? It should terminate. For which we already had an answer a few discussions back. Cause and effect theory. The effect will be in even in science or in regular life, ordinary life, we see the cause and effect. Effect is always for a longer time than the cause. Therefore, that's the answer they give for prarabdha there. Here, Vedanta gives one more beautiful angle. Someone attains the state of Jivan Mukta, a realized soul. If prarabdha has to end there, he or she will not be there to speak, to guide, to initiate, to propagate, to discourse. Therefore, prarabdha is something which needs to be exhausted by that particular body, subtle and gross. But for a realized soul, it just doesn't matter. Who is a realized soul? Somebody who in a waking stage can see this universe as a world of dreams. See, we see dreams every day, or at least quite often. Only in our dream state, not in our waking state. But for a realized soul, he will see you, me, and the rest of the universe as if it is simply a dream and does not have any impact on him or her, and enables the realized soul to engage and connect with this universe and the jivas and impart guidance. Therefore, prarabdha and knowledge again are not incompatible. Then the next question comes, if you say You realize this in a state of samadhi. We go to sleep every day. Why not we achieve jnana or knowledge during sleep? How is, see, that's also a samadhi. Vedanta says the difference between nirvikalpa samadhi and deep sleep are different. In deep sleep, you allow everything around the world and within you to lie dormant, no doubt about it. You touch that frame of Ananda, no doubt about it. But we have not acquired the sense of discrimination. We don't see or realize that the body and the world are untrue. That cognition, that realization doesn't happen in deep sleep. So, deep sleep can neither be equated with Vikalpa Samadhi, nor can deep sleep be stated to be a state where somebody has realized. And Vedanta concludes this section on desire and prarabdha beautifully by saying and guiding us into the following. It says, look here, whenever there is a desire, either out of prarabdha or wishful, non-wishful or the other, there is also a desirer. So, desire has two components. Desire is one component, and the person who desires is another component. Both together act on this universe through the senses, through the organs of action, through the mind, and keep creating fresh desires. What does Vedanta, in the bottom line, impart to us? It says, desires are uncontrollable because it is guided by prarabdha, but the mind of the desirer can be switched off. See the beauty. Allow the desirer to slowly migrate, to shift positions, to disengage. Once that desirer stops engaging himself along with the desire, participates actively, if that gets disconnected, desires will continue to work in our lives. Pleasures and pains will continue to operate in our lives. But the desirer will be absent, and instead, the person who has the sense of cognition will realize that this is nothing but a dream or an illusion which we are guided into as part of our prarabdha, and allow him or her to exhaust it. So the whole journey of discussion or talking about desires and how to eclipse or get over desires, bottom line is indifference, bottom line is disconnection. Desirer should vanish slowly. Let's continue tomorrow. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A question is raised, who is the enjoyer? And Vedanta addresses this question squarely and comprehensively. Whether the enjoyer is the ultimate Brahman, the changeless self. If so, enjoyment is both pleasure and pain, which is subject to modification, and therefore Brahman is subject to modification, then the theory that Brahman is changeless goes wrong. So, is he the enjoyer? That's the question. Alternatively, are you saying, all right, it's not the changeless self, it is the changing self, which is the reflected self, Jiva, who is the enjoyer? How can it enjoy? Because it's only a reflected Jiva, it doesn't have an existence of its own. Its survival is dependent on the substratum, which is Brahman. For example, as long as there are sun rays, a mirror can reflect it into a dark room and give light. Suppose it is night time. What is the use of the mirror? The reflected rays can't appear. So you need the substratum, namely Brahman, for the reflected Jiva to emerge. So how do you say the reflected Jiva is the enjoyer? So please tell us clearly who is the enjoyer. Vedanta says you have to understand it in two stages. As long as there is enjoyership, thinking that this universe is true and Brahman is this self is body or the other sukshma sariras, as long as that sort of an enjoyment happens, the enjoyership is a combination of both the changeless self and the reflected self jiva. And upon removing the changeful self or the reflected self, the residue substratum that is left out is that Brahman. So, enjoyership at this stage is a combination. Two, when you say it's a combination, what do we mean by that? Vedanta says enjoyership as a combination is never given up, because the reflected jiva, because of the mistaken impression that it is the I, demands more and more out of this universe and keeps enjoying it again and again and again. So as a combination, they become invincible because of the mistaken superimposition of I. Now, how do you break the combination? Only then you can achieve realization. When you say it is so difficult, how do you break the combination? Vedanta comes to our rescue here, saying, when it comes to enjoyership as a combination, the concentration is always on the object of enjoyment. We saw that even earlier. Take a case of a gem. An indifferent person will say, this is stone. A person who wants it, craves it, will say, this is a precious gem. A person who craves but could not get it will feel angry. So, gem remains gem as a stone. So, Vedanta says, as a combination, the enjoyership, the process of enjoyment, the focus is always directed on the object of enjoyment. Now, what is the remedy to split this pair? The remedy is, henceforth, you continue to enjoy, but split or disconnect the pair. Imagine that the enjoyership concentrate through the process of discrimination, through the process of the acquisition of Vedantic knowledge, mentally figure out that the enjoyership is only the reflected self. Withdraw slowly through the process of discrimination. Withdraw the substratum slowly. And Vedanta gives a few examples. Take domestic life. We like our children, we like our wife, we like our possessions. Are we ready to give it up? No. Like that, start liking the substratum and say that I won't give it up. Somebody goes for a competition. Will they not prepare intensely for that competition to succeed? Prepare the mind with focus, that concentrate only on the combination of enjoyership by splitting the substratum. Many of us perform pujas, prayers with a lot of faith to get worldly pleasure or heavenly pleasures. Are we not doing with absolute faith? Have that faith in yourself. Withdrawal, preparation, and absolute faith. The faith we have in our prayers. Have the same faith in our own self. Like the Siddhas and the yogis who practice with so much of concentration to achieve siddhis. Concentrate on the self to say that you are not the enjoyer. Make the self believe it is not the enjoyer in this combination. So, this sustained concentration, faith, practice, and withdrawal, sustain, continuous over a period of time, what will it yield? That's the question. Vedanta says, as a combination, they remain as enjoyership. Now, by sustained practice, once we cut this knot out, then Brahman, the substratum or the changeless self, will become a witness. So, from the status of a mistaken enjoyership, of the mistaken identity, it acquires its true status, which is changeless, which remains so forever, as a witness. This is the practice Vedanta prescribes. Break them. Once you break them, the residual part will remain. It will show to you that it has all along been only a mere witness and it has never enjoyed it. It is a mistaken notion that it is also enjoying it. So, that status of witness we will reach. Now, what is the benefit of reaching that status? Vedanta says, once you are able to identify Brahman as a witness, then what remains is the reflected self as an enjoyer. How long can it enjoy without the substratum? It is on the path to extinction. This will happen by default. Together they are invincible. Once we disconnect them, disassociate them, and start concentrating and find out and be convinced that Brahman is only a witness, then the reflected self stands on its own. And how long? Without the sun rays, what can the mirror do into the dark room? The jiva has to find its way out. It will become extinct. It's only a question of time, says Vedanta. So, who is the enjoyer? It's a combination. Once the combination breaks, who is the enjoyer? The enjoyer has always been the mistaken reflected self. And Brahman always remains the witness. But as a combination, it works in the world. As a dissolved relationship between the two, they don't work with the world because the focus, as Vedanta prescribes examples, leave the object of enjoyment, concentrate only on the enjoyer, and then the sense of discrimination will be born to know that it's a witness and Brahman has always been a witness all throughout. Let's see tomorrow.